Alright, now that Secret of the Storm has been out for a little bit, I want to talk about a survivor tier list for the new DLC survivors. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't unlocked the secret survivor. You should probably know by now, but just in case you don't, here's your warning. So in Seekers of the Storm, we are blessed with not one, not two, but 3 new survivors. The Seeker, Chef, and the False Sun. Each of the new survivors comes with alternate skills that will change where they place on the tier list. Also, real quick, this is only going to be for the 3 new survivors. I haven't even touched any of the old survivors. So I have no comments or thoughts on where they would place in a tier list for Seekers of the Storm, but it's always NG S tier, number 1, top, always. So keep that in mind. And Commando F tier sucks always. GG. So for starters, let's talk about the Seeker, who is the default character you have unlocked as soon as you buy the Seekers of the Storm DLC. I'm not going to be going over every single ability that they have and how it works. That's for a guy that's coming out in the future, so don't worry about that right now. So there are 2 caveats I'm going to add to this ranking. If you're playing solo, and if you're using Unseen Hand, which is her default secondary, I would consider Seeker to be an A tier survivor. All of her abilities are good. You got damage, AoE, you can increase your stats, you can heal yourself, you have mobility to go wherever you want to go, it's not just a simple jump, and her meditate skill is pretty good. Gives you bonus stats and functions like a power elixir once you have max stacks. Now, if you're playing multiplayer, she moves up to S tier because she can revive other players. Your friend really sucks at the game? Don't worry, we've got Mercy ult at home. Now, for her alternate special, Soul Spiral, I would say this takes her into the S tier even if you're playing by yourself. Soul Spiral, or what most people know it as, her balls, take her from being a strong character to an overpowered character. Soul Spiral allows you to summon balls that circle around the Seeker, basically melee range, dealing 100% damage per second and giving you a barrier. On top of that, it has a 1.0 proc coefficient, so it's good for proccing items. Using this in combination with her utility skill, Sojourn, which turns you into a floating ball that's completely invulnerable to all damage. Imagine Volcanic Egg that does more damage and lasts for as long as you want it to last. You do take damage in Sojourn, and you start slowly losing healing as you're in Sojourn. So even if you were to have like 10 Weeping Funguses to completely negate all the damage it does, the longer you stay in Sojourn, the less healing you receive until eventually you go down to 0%. Barrier does not function like healing, so you can stay in there infinitely as long as you have enough barrier. On top of that, you can't use any other skills while you're in Sojourn, so you need the Soul Spiral, her little balls, to be swinging around and smacking things in the face. It's absolutely ludicrous the amount of damage you can do with a Sojourn and Soul Spiral combo, as there's absolutely no risk for this rain. You can check out many of my Seeker videos or my live streams where I play her all the time, twitch.tv/RND Thursday. Wow. But too long, didn't read, listen, or watch. The Seeker with her balls, S tier. Now moving on to Chef, the second character in the game, you probably unlock him before you even get the False Sun, is probably one of the more disappointing parts of the DLC. The Twitter Chef guy has been begging for Chef all this time only to have this bastardized version released. So how does Chef fare among all of us? Pretty badly. While he's not exactly Commando tier, I think I would actually have more fun playing Commando than I would be playing Chef right now. Chef's primary, much like Artificer's primary, has charges to it. You get 3 cleavers which you can throw out, and the way that it works is you throw your M1 and you can recall it at any time, although if you recall it too soon, it won't go the full length that it can. Meaning that if an enemy is far enough away, you're going to have to throw it and wait a second for the cleaver to actually get there. It does do damage the first time it goes through an enemy and when you recall it, but you can't throw it at the feet of an enemy and have the cleaver spin around to hit it multiple times. That does not work. Very disappointing, yes I know. Speaking of abilities that are like Artificer, his secondary, Seer, is kind of like Artificer's Flamethrower, except it doesn't do damage. And it's a much shorter range. His utility skill isn't that bad, it's a little bit of mobility, and his default special isn't that bad either. His passive drops healing orbs if you hit an enemy with more than one ability, and the healing increases the more abilities you hit them with, and they all have to be unique abilities, so you can't just hit it with a cleaver 4 times. It's essentially Monster Teeth, so it's not that great, but it's not that bad either. His alternate special, Yes Chef, will probably be remembered by people who have played Risk of Rain 1, as all it does is upgrade one of your 3 abilities. So for example, if he uses his Yes Chef ability and uses his M1, it will shoot cleavers in a giant circle around him. I would advocate for you to never get this ability, it's not that good. And one last thing for default Chef, I don't know if this is a bug or not, but after you use Seer, you're kind of locked out of using any other ability for a solid second. Meaning that after you use this low damage flamethrower that will put you in melee range of enemies, you're kind of just stuck there looking awkwardly at the Lemurian that's about to blow your face off. It does not feel good at all, and I almost never use the Seer ability just because of how janky this is. So if I were to place default Chef on the tier list, I'd put him probably C tier. He does actually do a lot more damage than some other survivors, looking at you, Commando, but as the game goes on, it just feels worse and worse to play him. Your attack speed could be as fast as possible, but your cleavers still need to go the full length before you can call it back, meaning that your M1 is kind of gimped. If you have 0 cooldown on all of your abilities, guess what? That doesn't matter either. What are you going to do? Sear a lot? Yeah, I don't think so. Gearbox definitely didn't cook with Chef on this one. That's for certain. Now, big asterisks on this next part. If you're on PC, I highly recommend you download the mod Better Chef Primary by Zhao921. Thank you, Zhao. This takes Chef all the way from C tier, maybe even D tier, to possibly A, S tier? Essentially, all it does is remove the charges and allows you to hold the M1 down, so his M1 functions basically the same as it does in Risk of Rain 1 and Risk of Rain Returns. This change by itself makes Chef 10 times better, and almost too strong. If Gearbox would just change the functionality so that the cleaver worked like this mod makes it work, and then reduce the numbers of cleaver itself, this would be so much better. It's also just quality of life because I want to be able to hold down my M1 without just throwing it 2 inches in front of my face. So if you're on PC, I highly recommend you download this. It is a very good mod, and I cannot play Chef any other way. Okay, now we will talk about the False Sun, the Secret Survivor. The False Sun seems like one of the better survivors that they made in Seekers of the Storm. And by better, I mean basically the best. Design-wise, gameplay-wise, and otherwise, I think the False Sun is what they really cooked with. My only gripes would be on some of the animations and wonkiness with his M2, and some of the sound effects and whatnot. As some people have already said, he kind of feels like a modded survivor because he lacks a lot of the polish that you would expect. Specifically, his high damage abilities don't feel like they have that oomph to them, but outside the visual and audio standpoint, I think that the False Sun is a really good survivor. I also have my suspicions that a lot of the items that were added into Seekers of the Storm were built around the False Sun. Luminous Shot, Antler Shield, and Noxious Thorn are 3 items that I think that were developed with a tank character, aka the False Sun, in mind. A little long story short on this so I don't yap like I did with the Chef section. The False Sun gains lunar spikes as he gains more HP from items. So think Bison Steak and Infusion and Stone Flux Pauldron, which is also very good on this character. Every unused spike gives you attack speed and armor, 5% attack speed and 2.5 armor to be exact. And used spikes give you 5% move speed and 2.5 health regen. What's cool is these spikes that are his secondary skill add a 10% damage debuff to enemies per stack you put on them. So 1 is 10%, 2 is 20%, 3 is 30%, etc. The most important part of the debuff is it functions like bleed instead of collapse. What I mean is, as long as you keep applying this debuff on enemies, it will keep stacking infinitely. I learned this during a cope run where I was doing no damage, and when I found out, I immediately was able to get out of the cope. He also has like a mercenary-like dash, it even kind of looks similar, and an insanely good special called Laser of the Father, which you can charge up for more damage, and the duration increases the more HP you get, just like your lunar spikes. His alternate special, Laser Burst, does 1000% damage and refills 30% of your lunar spikes. I would say that the False Sun, with the default special, is an S tier survivor. It's hard to beat the Seeker with literal invulnerability, but I dare say he might be better just because of how much damage he does, how tanky he is, and how much fun he is to play. The alternate special, which, side note, although it does say fire a piercing laser, it does not pierce because if you look in the game, the pierce is not highlighted like it is on Commando. Meaning it's not a special effect, it's just how they phrased it, which was odd. And I think I forgot to mention you do get more charges with this ability as you gain more HP. I think even with the alternate special, the False Sun is an S tier survivor. If you take the alternate special, you're going to have a lot more trouble dealing with flying enemies because you don't really have anything in your kit other than lunar spikes to hit them. And although Laser Burst says it does 1000% damage, it feels really, really weak. If you plan on having lots and lots of stacks of lunar spikes, like 20 plus, then it would make sense for you to get Laser Burst instead of the default. Anyway, so long story short, the False Sun with his default special, I put him above Seeker, and the alternate special, I would put him below Seeker, but still S tier. So there you have it, folks. There's my DLC survivor tier list for Seekers of the Storm. I'll probably do one later with all the other survivors after I've played more, but for these 3 survivors, this is where I would put them. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm way off base? Do you think Chef is S tier and False Sun and Seeker are actually F tier? Let me know in the comments below, or when I'm streaming, twitch.tv/RND Thursday. Swagmoney69, signing out.